Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're jumping into a really profound and honestly pretty intense theological concept from our source material, what's known as the close of probation. It's a huge idea that touches on destiny, the power of our decisions, and the finality of our choices.
So let's just start with this question right here. Think about it. We all kind of depend on second chances, right? The chance to say you're sorry, to try again, to fix a mistake. But imagine, what if there was a point in time when that window of opportunity just closed for good? That's the core idea we're going to unpack today.
Okay, so to get our heads around this big theological concept, let's use a simple everyday analogy. Think about starting a new job. You often have a probationary period, right? It's a set amount of time where you have to prove yourself, show what you're made of, before they make a final decision and your position becomes permanent. It's a time of testing.
Now, our sources take that idea of a probationary period and apply it to life itself. The idea is that our time here isn't just a random series of events. It's actually a time of preparation, a sort of testing ground that's been designed for a very specific purpose.
This quote really gets to the heart of it. It suggests that the challenges and the trials we go through, they aren't for nothing. They're actually seen as a way to shape and refine our character, to get us ready for something bigger, and maybe to shake us up a bit so we don't get too comfortable or complacent. It's all about being shaped for a purpose.
All right, so if life is a test, what are we being graded on? What's the standard for passing? Well, the source materials are actually super clear on this. They lay out a very specific framework that's built on divine principles.
It really boils down to this. There's a direct connection between our actions and the results. The texts are pretty blunt that the well-being of God's people is tied directly to their obedience. It's a clear cause and effect kind of deal.
So where does this standard come from? It's all rooted in God's law, and the Ark of the Covenant is the perfect symbol for that. The Ten Commandments inside weren't just a list of rules. They were seen as a direct reflection of God's own character, the ultimate blueprint for right and wrong.
And according to the sources, the life of Christ is held up as the perfect embodiment of this standard. His life is presented as the ultimate example of what it looks like to live in complete harmony with that divine will.
Now, it's one thing to know what the standard is, right? It's a whole other thing to actually live up to it. And the sources are packed with very real, very human stories about this struggle and what happens when people fall short.
We see this so clearly in the story of Israel's first king, Saul. He was put in what the text calls a trying position, basically a moment of extreme pressure. And instead of following a direct command from God, he decided to trust his own judgment.
And the fallout from that choice, it was swift and it was permanent. His kingdom was lost, just like that. This story is used in the sources as a powerful example of how our choices, especially when it comes to obedience, can have final, irreversible consequences.
And this is where it gets really interesting. The sources contrast Saul with his successor, King David. Now, David also sinned, and he sinned grievously. But the critical difference was in how they responded. Saul tried to make excuses, to downplay what he did. David, on the other hand, just broke down. He owned his guilt completely, with no excuses, just sincere remorse. And that distinction, that's everything.
So, given this really high standard and our very human tendency to mess up, what are we supposed to do? Well, the source materials don't just leave you hanging. They actually outline a clear path, a kind of roadmap for preparation, to get ready for that final decision.
And the very first step, according to these writings, is just a conscious decision to turn back. It's framed as an invitation, an appeal to come home, that's based on a promise of redemption.
This path isn't vague either. It's laid out in these very practical steps. It starts with acknowledging what you've done wrong and confessing it, just like David did. And from there, you move into the active work of leaving bad habits behind and intentionally building a whole new character.
And building that character, it's not a passive thing. The sources are really emphatic that you have to actively cultivate these positive traits. Things like patience and love. You have to practice self-control and start seeing yourself as a holy temple. The goal is to develop a character that can actually stand the test of time.
Okay, now here is a really fascinating part of this whole preparation idea. It's not just about your spiritual life, it's also about your physical health. The texts draw a direct line from what you eat to your spiritual well-being, arguing that certain foods can literally dull your moral and spiritual senses.
And this idea of health reform is pretty comprehensive.
It's about avoiding harmful food and drink, valuing things like fresh air, and just practicing self-control in all areas of life. The sources even say it's important to start teaching these principles to children from a super young age.
And to make it really practical, one of the writers gives a personal example. She says that after she adopted a simple 2-meal-a-day diet, her health had never been better. It's a really clear link between simple living and clarity of mind.
So, all of this, the testing, the standard, the human struggle, the call to prepare, it's all building towards one thing. It's all leading to the central concept of this whole explainer, the ultimate end of this period of probation.
And here we are, the close of probation. According to these sources, this is the moment when the testing period ends for every single person. It is the point when the second chances run out, when all our decisions become final, and every individual's destiny is sealed, forever.
The language the sources use to describe this moment for those who are unprepared, it is incredibly stark. It's powerful. This verse from Jeremiah really captures that feeling of finality, that point of no return when the consequences of your choices finally catch up to you.
But, and this is so important, the overwhelming message in these texts isn't about fear, it's about urgency. The emphasis is on the present. As this quote says, now is the accepted time. That day of salvation isn't some far-off event. It's the time we have right now, today, before that final door closes.
And that really leaves us with a final thought to mull over. This whole huge theological framework, from the test of life to the close of probation, it all points back to one profoundly personal question. If every choice we make is actually shaping an eternal destiny, what does that mean for how we live our lives right here, right now?